Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he knelt in the royal garden, pulling weeds from between the silver moonflowers. The twin suns of Draconis Prime hung high in the purple sky, making the work hot and tiring. He had been a servant in the Dragon King's palace for 3 years now. Ever since his transport ship had crashed on this world, and the dragons had offered him work instead of sending him away. The palace was enormous, with towers that reached into the clouds and halls wide enough for the largest dragons to fly through. Marcus was just one of 50 human servants who worked here, cleaning floors, tending gardens, and doing tasks that the proud dragon nobles considered beneath them. Most days, Marcus felt invisible. The dragons walked past him without looking down, their scales gleaming in shades of gold, silver, and deep blue. Marcus did not mind the quiet life. He found peace in the garden, watching strange alien flowers bloom and listening to the songs of crystal birds in the trees. The work was simple, and he had a small room in the servant quarters where he could read books from the palace library in his free time. On this particular afternoon, Marcus was working in a forgotten corner of the garden that few people visited. Tall hedges surrounded a small courtyard, with a dried fountain in the center. The stone benches were covered in moss, and ivy climbed the walls. It was beautiful, in a wild, neglected way. As Marcus trimmed the hedges, he heard a sound that made him stop. It was soft, almost like crying, but trying to be hidden. He set down his tools and walked around the fountain. There, sitting in the shadow of the wall, was a young dragon. The dragon was small, perhaps only 10 years old in dragon years. His scales were deep emerald green with hints of gold along the edges. He had intelligent amber eyes that were currently filled with tears. What struck Marcus most was that the young dragon was not moving his back legs. They lay still on the stone ground, and Marcus could see the sadness in how the dragon looked at them. Marcus knew he should probably leave. Servants were not supposed to bother the royal family, and this was clearly someone important, based on the silver bands around his horns. But something in those sad eyes made Marcus stay. "Hello," Marcus said gently, keeping his distance. "Are you all right?" The young dragon's head snapped up, surprise replacing the sadness for a moment. "You are a human," he said, his voice young but clear. "Yes, my name is Marcus. I work in the gardens." The dragon looked around nervously. "You should not be talking to me. If the guards see you, you might get in trouble." "Maybe," Marcus said with a small smile. "But this corner is very quiet. Nobody comes here much. That is why the plants are so wild." The young dragon looked at the overgrown garden. "I come here because nobody looks for me here." Marcus understood that feeling. He sat down on a bench, a respectful distance away. "It is a good place for thinking. The flowers are pretty, even if they are messy." "What is that one?" the dragon asked, pointing with his front claw at a bush with blue and silver blooms. "Those are called star whisper flowers. They only bloom when both suns are in the sky at the same time. At night, they close up tight like little fists." The dragon looked interested. "How do you know that?" "I watch them," Marcus said. "When you spend time with plants, you start to notice their patterns. That vine over there only grows clockwise around trees, never the other direction. And those tiny yellow flowers smell like honey in the morning but like vanilla in the evening." For the first time, the young dragon smiled a little. "I never noticed those things." "Most people do not," Marcus said. "They are too busy to watch the small details." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Marcus went back to his trimming, and the young dragon watched him work. Finally, the dragon spoke again. "My name is Azareth. I am the king's son." Marcus had suspected as much, but he simply nodded. "It is nice to meet you, Prince Azareth." "Just Azareth is fine," the prince said quietly. "When people call me prince, they say it with pity in their voices." Marcus looked at the young dragon's still back legs but did not ask about them. Instead, he said, "Would you like to hear about the insects that live in this garden? There is one that looks like a flower petal. It fools birds into leaving it alone." Azareth's eyes brightened. "Really? Can you show me?" Marcus spent the next hour pointing out different insects, explaining which flowers they preferred and how they helped the plants grow. Azareth listened carefully, asking smart questions and sometimes laughing at the strange behaviors of the garden creatures. When the shadows grew long and the first sun began to set, Azareth said, "I should go back before they send someone to look for me." "But Marcus, will you be here tomorrow?" I work in this section every afternoon," Marcus said. "Then maybe I will come back. To learn more about the garden." Marcus smiled. "I would like that." As Azareth used his strong front legs to pull himself toward the palace entrance, moving slowly but with dignity, Marcus felt something unexpected in his chest. Not pity, but a simple recognition. Here was someone who felt alone, just like Marcus sometimes did. Someone who wanted to be seen as more than their limitations. Marcus gathered his tools and headed back to the servant quarters. He did not know it then, but that afternoon, in the Forgotten Garden, was the beginning of something important. A friendship that would grow like the star whisper flowers, slowly and quietly, until one day it would bloom in a way that changed everything. That night, Marcus went to the library and found books about dragon anatomy and medicine. If Azareth was going to visit the garden again, Marcus wanted to understand more about his new friend's world. HFY Sci-Fi Story outlines in 5 parts. Claude 3 months had passed since Marcus and Azareth first met in the garden. The young prince had made remarkable progress. His back legs could now move slightly, and with the wheeled platform Marcus had built, Azareth could explore the entire palace grounds independently. More importantly, Azareth's spirit had transformed. He smiled often, asked questions constantly, and had begun studying governance and law in the palace library. Marcus noticed that Azareth was reading advanced texts about leadership and diplomacy. "Why are you studying these subjects so deeply?" he asked one afternoon. Azareth looked up from his book, his amber eyes serious. "You taught me that I should not let my body define my future. If I cannot be a warrior prince, perhaps I can be a wise prince, someone who leads with intelligence instead of strength." Marcus felt proud of his friend. That is a wonderful goal. Life seemed to be improving for both of them. The queen had ensured that no one interfered with their friendship. And even some of the other palace dragons had begun treating Azareth with more respect when they saw his determination and growing knowledge. Then, everything changed. One morning, the palace filled with activity. Banners were hung in the great halls, and servants rushed everywhere preparing for important guests. Marcus learned that a delegation from the Skyclaw clan was arriving. The Skyclaws were warrior dragons, famous throughout the galaxy for their fighting skills and aerial combat abilities. "They are coming to discuss a marriage alliance," one of the other servants whispered to Marcus. "Their champion's daughter and Prince Azareth. It would unite 2 powerful dragon families." Marcus felt worry grip his heart. He found Azareth in the library, looking pale and anxious. "Did you know about this?" Marcus asked gently. "My father told me this morning," Azareth said, his voice shaking. "The Skyclaw delegation wants to meet me before they agree to anything." "Marcus, what if they see me and reject the alliance? What if I embarrass my father in front of the entire court?" "You could never be an embarrassment," Marcus said firmly. "You are intelligent, kind, and wise beyond your years. But I cannot fly, I cannot fight, I cannot even walk properly. What warrior clan would want their daughter to marry someone like me?" Marcus sat beside his friend. "Then perhaps they are not worthy of you. But let us not assume the worst before it happens. You have grown so much, Azareth. Show them who you really are." The delegation arrived the next day with great ceremony. 20 warrior dragons landed in the palace courtyard, their scales gleaming in shades of red and bronze. They were larger than most palace dragons, with battle scars that they wore like medals. Leading them was General Korvax and his daughter, Zyrella, a fierce young dragon with crimson scales and sharp, intelligent eyes. King Thazuron held a formal reception in the throne room. All the palace nobles attended, dressed in their finest jewels. Marcus watched from the servants' entrance, his heart pounding with worry for his friend. Azareth entered the throne room using his wheeled platform. Marcus had helped him prepare, making sure the platform's carvings were polished and that Azareth wore the royal crown that marked him as heir to the throne. The young prince held his head high, but Marcus could see the nervousness in his eyes. The great hall fell silent as Azareth moved toward the center. The Skyclaw warriors stared at him, their expressions unreadable. General Korvax stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the young prince. "So this is the heir to the Dragon Kingdom," Korvax said, his voice booming through the hall. "King Thazuran, you did not mention that your son cannot walk." King Thazuran's voice was steady, but Marcus could hear the tension in it. "My son had an illness as a hatchling, but he is intelligent and capable. He will make a fine king." General Korvax walked slowly around Azareth, examining him like someone might examine a broken tool. "A dragon who cannot fly is like a sword that cannot cut. What use is he?" Azareth's eyes dropped to the floor. Marcus wanted to rush forward and defend his friend, but he knew servants could not speak in royal proceedings. Zyrella, the general's daughter, spoke up. Her voice was cold and clear. "Father, the Skyclaw clan has never allied with weakness. Our bloodline is pure and strong. I cannot marry someone who would make our family look foolish." The words hit like physical blows. Several of the palace nobles looked away in shame and sympathy. Others nodded in agreement with the Skyclaw clan's assessment. King Thazuran's face showed both anger and pain. "You insult my son and my house. We state only truth," General Korvax replied. "A leader must be strong in body and spirit. Your son may be intelligent, but intelligence alone does not command respect among dragons. We withdraw our offer of alliance." The Skyclaw delegation turned to leave. As they walked toward the doors, General Korvax spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "Perhaps the king should consider naming a different heir, one who can properly represent the kingdom." The throne room erupted in shocked whispers. King Thazuran stood frozen, clearly torn between defending his son and maintaining diplomatic relations. Queen Seraphina moved toward Azareth, her face full of concern. But Azareth did not wait for his mother's comfort. He turned his wheeled platform and rolled quickly out of the throne room through a side entrance. Marcus immediately followed, his heart breaking for his friend. He found Azareth in the Forgotten Garden, in their special corner. The young prince had knocked over his platform and was lying on the ground, tears streaming down his face. "They are right," Azareth sobbed. "I am useless. I bring shame to my father and the kingdom. A real prince would be strong and capable. All your lessons and encouragement cannot change what I am." Marcus knelt beside him. "Azareth, listen to me." "No," the prince cried. "You have been kind to me, Marcus. But kindness does not change reality. I thought I could be something more, but I was fooling myself. The Skyclaws showed me the truth. I am broken, and everyone knows it." "You are not broken," Marcus said firmly. But Azareth turned away from him. "Please leave me alone. I do not want to talk anymore. I do not want false hope. I just want to be alone." Marcus stood there, feeling helpless. He had seen his friend grow so much in confidence and capability. But now, in one terrible moment, all that progress seemed shattered. The Skyclaws had confirmed Azareth's deepest fears about himself. As Marcus walked slowly back toward the palace, he knew that something had to be done. Azareth was giving up, retreating into the darkness of self-doubt. The young prince was at his lowest point, and Marcus feared that without intervention, Azareth might never recover from this public humiliation. That night, Marcus stayed awake in his room, thinking hard. There had to be a way to help his friend see his own worth. The answer came to him slowly, like dawn breaking over the horizon. It was risky, and would require great courage from both of them. But Marcus believed it was the only way. Tomorrow, he would propose something bold to Azareth. Something that would either save the prince, or make things even worse. Marcus hoped desperately that he was making the right choice. For 2 days, Azareth refused to see anyone. He stayed in his chambers with the doors locked, ignoring even his mother's gentle pleas. The palace felt heavy with sadness and tension. King Thazuran held emergency meetings with his advisors, trying to manage the political damage from the failed alliance. The Skyclaw clan's rejection had spread throughout the kingdom, and whispers filled every hallway. Marcus waited at the garden every afternoon, hoping his friend would appear. On the third day, he decided he could wait no longer. He walked directly to Azareth's chambers, ignoring the guards who told him the prince wanted no visitors. "I am sorry, but I must see him," Marcus said firmly. "Please tell the prince that his friend Marcus is here, and will not leave until they speak." The guard looked uncertain but went inside. A few moments later, the door opened slightly. Marcus entered to find Azareth lying on cushions by the window, staring out at the sky where other dragons flew freely. The young prince looked tired and defeated. "You should not have come," Azareth said quietly. "There is nothing you can say that will help." Marcus sat down on the floor nearby. "Then I will not say anything. I will just sit here with you." They remained in silence for a long time. Finally, Azareth spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Everyone thinks I am worthless. Even my father's advisors are suggesting he should name someone else as heir. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps I should step aside for someone who can be a proper prince." "Do you remember what I told you about humans?" Marcus asked. "How we are not the strongest or fastest species." "That is different," Azareth said. "Is it? Let me tell you about some humans from Earth's history." Marcus moved closer. There was a man named Stephen Hawking. His body stopped working when he was young. He could not walk, could not move his arms, could not even speak without a machine. But his mind was brilliant. He became one of the greatest scientists in human history and taught us about stars and black holes and the nature of the universe itself. Azareth turned slightly, listening despite himself. There was another man named Franklin Roosevelt. He could not walk because of an illness. Yet he led my entire planet through its darkest time of war and suffering. He gave people hope when they had none. His inability to walk did not stop him from being one of the greatest leaders humanity ever knew. "But they were humans," Azareth said. "Dragons are different. We are judged by different standards." "Then change the standards," Marcus said simply. "Azareth, you have spent these months studying governance, diplomacy, and law. You know more about running a kingdom than most of your father's advisors. You think deeply about justice and fairness. These are the qualities that make a great leader, not the ability to breathe fire or fly fast." "The court will never accept me," Azareth said. But there was a tiny spark of hope in his voice. "Not if you hide in here." "But what if you showed them? What if you stood before the court and proved that you are exactly the prince this kingdom needs?" Azareth looked frightened. "How?" "They have already seen me. They know I am weak." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Let me help you. I have an idea, but it will require courage. More courage than flying or fighting ever could. Are you willing to try?" Something in Marcus's conviction reached through Azareth's despair. Slowly, the young prince nodded. Marcus worked through the night in his workshop, a small room he had been given permission to use for building Azareth's wheeled platform. Using materials from around the palace and his knowledge of human engineering, he created something new. A mobility harness made of light metal and crystal power cells that the dragons used for their lamps. The harness would support Azareth's back legs, allowing him to stand upright on all four limbs. But Marcus designed it to be beautiful, not hidden. The metal was carved with traditional dragon symbols of wisdom and justice. The crystals glowed softly with blue light, making the harness look like ceremonial armor rather than a medical device. When Azareth saw it the next morning, his eyes widened. "Marcus, this is beautiful." "It is meant to be," Marcus said. "This is not something to hide or be ashamed of. This is a tool that lets you show the court who you really are. A prince who adapts, who finds solutions, who does not let challenges defeat him." They spent the day practicing. With the harness, Azareth could stand tall and walk slowly but with dignity. It was not perfect, but it gave him presence and mobility. That evening, Azareth sent word to his father. He requested permission to address the full court the following day. King Thazuron, surprised but hopeful, agreed immediately. the throne room filled with nobles, advisors, and curious palace residents. Word had spread that the prince would make an announcement. Some came expecting him to step down as heir, others came simply to witness what they thought would be further embarrassment. Marcus stood at the side of the room with the other servants, his hands trembling with nervousness. Everything depended on the next few minutes. The great doors opened. Azareth entered, walking on all four legs for the first time in his life. The mobility harness gleamed in the light of the throne room's many chandeliers. The young prince moved slowly but steadily toward the center of the room, his head held high. The entire court fell silent, shocked by the sight. King Thazuron stood from his throne, his eyes filling with tears. Queen Seraphina placed her claw over her heart. Azareth reached the center of the throne room and turned to face the assembled dragons. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and strong. Members of the court, nobles of the realm, I stand before you today not to apologize for who I am, but to speak about who we can become as a kingdom. A murmur went through the crowd, but Azareth continued. The Skyclaw clan rejected me because I cannot fly or fight as warrior dragons do. They said I was weak, and that weakness cannot lead. But I ask you this. What is true strength? Is it only the power to destroy? Or is it also the wisdom to build? Is it only the ability to fight? Or is it also the courage to choose peace, when peace is the harder path? Several of the older nobles leaned forward, listening carefully now. I have spent these past months studying our kingdom's history and laws. I have found problems that have gone unsolved for years because everyone was too busy proving their strength to notice them. I have solutions to propose. Changes that could make our kingdom stronger, not through conquest, but through justice and fairness for all our citizens. Azareth gestured to the harness he wore. This device was created by my friend Marcus, a human. He saw a problem and found a solution. He did not accept that things had to stay as they were. This is the kind of thinking our kingdom needs. Adaptation, innovation, the courage to try new paths. One of the king's senior advisors, an ancient dragon named Thorian, stood up. Prince Azareth, these are fine words. But words alone do not govern kingdoms. You are correct, Azareth said, not intimidated. That is why I have prepared detailed proposals. Azareth gestured with his front claw. And servants brought forward several scrolls. I have documented plans for establishing healing centers specifically for dragons with physical challenges. Currently, those who cannot fly or who have injuries are simply left to manage on their own. We waste the potential of countless citizens who could contribute to our society if given proper support and adaptive tools. The court listened with growing attention. Azareth's voice grew stronger as he continued. I also propose educational reforms. Right now, we only honor those who excel in combat and aerial skills. But what about dragons who are gifted in mathematics, science, art, or diplomacy? We should create academies that recognize all forms of excellence, not just physical strength. Several younger nobles nodded in agreement. Even some of the older dragons looked thoughtful. Furthermore, I recommend we establish a merit-based advisory council. Currently, advisors are chosen based on their family lineage and combat achievements. But governing a kingdom requires understanding of law, economics, and the needs of common citizens. We should select advisors based on their knowledge and wisdom, not just their ancestry. Advisor Thorian stood again, but this time his voice was less challenging. Prince Azareth, these proposals show remarkable depth of thought, but implementing such changes would be expensive and difficult. I have calculated the costs, Azareth replied calmly. And I have identified sources of funding through more efficient tax collection and reducing waste in the military budget. The numbers are in these scrolls. I welcome your review and suggestions for improvement. At that moment, a loud voice interrupted from the back of the throne room. General Korvax of the Skyclaw clan had returned. Along with several of his warriors, they must have heard about the assembly and come to witness it. Pretty words from a crippled prince, Korvax said harshly. But the galaxy is dangerous. When enemies attack, we need leaders who can fight, not leaders who write proposals. The throne room tensed. King Thazuron started to rise, anger on his face, but Azareth held up a claw, asking his father to wait. "General Korvax," Azareth said, his voice steady. "You are correct that the galaxy can be dangerous, but I would ask you to consider this. How many conflicts could be prevented with wise diplomacy before they ever become wars? How many lives could be saved by a leader who seeks understanding before unleashing destruction? You speak of peace because you cannot fight," Korvax scoffed. "No," Azareth said firmly. "I speak of peace because I have studied our kingdom's history. I know that our greatest defeats came not from lack of military strength, but from poor decisions made by leaders who thought only of conquest. I also know that our greatest victories came from alliances built through trust and mutual respect, not through fear." Azareth moved closer to the general, his harness supporting him as he stood tall. "You value physical strength, General. That is understandable for a warrior. But tell me, would you respect a warrior who had the strength to destroy an enemy, but chose instead to make them an ally? Would you call that weakness, or would you call that a different kind of courage?" The throne room had gone completely silent. Even Korvax seemed taken aback by the young prince's directness. An old dragon named General Drakon, retired from military service decades ago, rose slowly from his seat. His voice was gravelly with age but filled with authority. "I served this kingdom for 70 years as a warrior. I fought in 12 wars, and I can tell you that this young prince speaks truth. The greatest leaders I knew were not always the fiercest fighters. They were the ones who knew when to fight and when to find another way." General Drakon looked directly at Korvax. "You sky-claw dragons pride yourselves on strength. But you forget your own history. Your clan's founder, Skyros the Wise, was known not for his battles but for uniting 7 warring clans through negotiation and shared vision. He understood that true strength includes wisdom." Other elder dragons began nodding. The tide in the room was shifting. Queen Seraphina stood gracefully and addressed the court. "I have watched my son these past months. I have seen him transform from a sad, isolated child into someone with purpose and vision. That transformation came because one human servant chose to see potential instead of limitation. If we are wise, we will do the same." King Thazuron finally spoke, his voice filled with emotion and pride. "My son has shown more courage today than I have seen in many battlefield veterans. He stands before you, vulnerable and honest, proposing ideas that could improve all our lives. The question is not whether he is fit to be crown prince. The question is whether we are wise enough to listen to him." The king descended from his throne and walked to Azareth. In front of the entire court, he placed his claw on his son's shoulder. "I officially confirm Prince Azareth as crown prince and heir to the Dragon Kingdom. Furthermore, I decree that his proposals be reviewed and implemented immediately where possible." The court erupted in discussion. Most voices were supportive, though some remained skeptical. But the decision was made. General Korvax stared at Azareth for a long moment. Finally, he gave a slight bow of his head. "Perhaps we Skyclaws judged too quickly. The young prince has spirit, if nothing else." It was not a full apology, but it was acknowledgement. As the assembly ended and dragons filed out of the throne room, King Thazuron called Marcus forward. "Marcus, the human gardener," the king said. "My son tells me that everything he has become is because you chose to befriend him when no one else would. You taught him about human resilience and adaptation. You built tools to help him move. You gave him hope." Marcus bowed low. "Your Majesty, I simply treated your son as a friend. Anyone would have done the same, but no one did," Queen Seraphina said gently. "Only you have." The king continued. "I wish to offer you a position as royal consultant and personal advisor to the crown prince. You would be the first human to hold a noble title in our kingdom. Ready? Ready? I wish to overcome. I wish to offer you a position." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the honor, but he thought carefully before responding. "Your Majesty, I am grateful beyond words, but may I request something different? Instead of a title, Could you provide funding for a research center where humans and dragons can work together? A place where we combine our different knowledge to solve problems and create new innovations? The king looked surprised, then smiled. A research center. Yes, that is a worthy goal. You have proven that different species working together can achieve remarkable things. It shall be done. Months passed, and the changes began to take shape. The first healing center opened, offering support and adaptive technology to dragons with physical challenges. 3 new academies were established, focusing on science, arts, and governance. The advisory council was restructured to include members chosen for their expertise rather than their family names. The research center that Marcus had requested became a beautiful complex on the palace grounds. Human and dragon scientists worked side by side, sharing ideas and creating inventions that benefited both species. The mobility harness Marcus had designed for Azareth became the prototype for many other adaptive devices. Azareth grew into his role as crown prince with remarkable grace. His council sessions were known throughout the kingdom for their fairness and practical wisdom. Young dragons began to see that there were many paths to respect and achievement, not just the warrior's path. Years later, on a quiet afternoon, Marcus and Azareth sat together in the forgotten garden where their friendship had begun. Marcus was older now, his hair touched with gray. Azareth had grown into a magnificent adult dragon, his green scales gleaming in the sunlight. He still wore a mobility harness, now upgraded and refined, but he wore it with pride rather than shame. "Do you remember the first day we met here?" Azareth asked, looking at the star whisper flowers that still bloomed in the afternoon sun. "I remember a sad young dragon sitting alone," Marcus said with a smile. "And I remember thinking that maybe he just needed a friend." "You gave me more than friendship," Azareth said seriously. "You gave me the courage to believe I could be something more than my limitations. You showed me that different does not mean lesser." Marcus watched as young students, both dragon and human, walked past the garden on their way to classes at the new academy. "You took that courage and changed an entire kingdom, Azareth. That was all you." "Realm, it was us," Azareth corrected gently. "It always has been." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 friends from different worlds who had proven that compassion, respect, and shared purpose could bridge any divide. The forgotten garden was no longer forgotten. It had become a symbol of where great change could begin from the smallest act of kindness. The kingdom had transformed, not through conquest or force, but through the simple choice of one human to see worth where others saw only weakness, and one dragon's courage to prove that wisdom and compassion were strengths worthy of a crown. And in the research center nearby, the next generation continued their work, building a future where all beings, regardless of their differences, could contribute their unique gifts to making the galaxy a better place.